Welcome everybody. Thank you to everybody for coming this afternoon again. Some of you are regulars at our monthly 3D talk spot, and some of you are new. If after this is filmed, the talk will go up onto the STLS website and it will be accessible to all. I know, Luke, you saw how it was accessible last week, and it is easy to find and navigate, so Kathy, I'm sure, will send links to people. Okay, so we're really lucky today, in the next of our 3D talks, to have Rose, the infamous Rose,
yes,
from Kingsdown School, who is going to be talking to us about working memory. I hope that's what you're going to be talking about. It is
what I'm going to be talking about. If I go off on a tangent, pull me back, please. Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very interesting because working memory seems to be one of the top topics at the moment, and I've just come back, amazingly luckily, from a Thinking Schools conference where I heard a researcher called Dr. Joni Holmes speak, who is the head of the Centre for Attention, Learning and Memory unit at the University of Cambridge, and she was incredibly good at talking about working memory, the impact and characteristics. There is also, for some of the head teachers in the room and beyond, there was a very good article actually at the head teachers report called Improving Working Memory. So it's very much a hot topic at the moment. We tend to use, just as a quick sort of advert, Memory Magic. You may well have seen this before. If you haven't, we do offer people options to come along to the school and have a quick look and see how it works and what the impact is. So what actually is working memory? Well, we actually have 6 key areas of our memory. The first of which is the procedural. This is where you learn to ride a bike, and like an elephant, you never actually forget how to ride a bike. It seems to come back to you at the moment of need. Then we have our semantics memory. That's your facts memory. And just like facts that you don't use or things in the cupboard that you don't use, it has a use by date. So if you don't use it, you will lose it. From there we have our autobiographical memory, which of course are our life memories, some of which we share and some of which we are very happy to keep hidden away somewhere. And then we have our episodic memory, which generally speaking can last a couple of months, a couple of weeks or a few days, depending on how useful and pertinent it is to our day-to-day life. But the key component of memory starts originally with our working memory. And if you think of in terms of a memory stick, it's the smallest memory stick you can ever find. It's tiny. And in fact, its capability of storing of information really only ranges from 5 to 9 pieces of information at a time. So if you're listening to this, you will remember 5 to 9 pieces of information from it, hopefully. And if you're taking notes, you are adding to that procedurally and through writing and adding a different variant into the listening, and you will be able to remember much more because those prompts will then hook you back in to the experience. So the key development of your working memory actually starts between the ages of 4 and continues all the way up to 14. At the point of 14, your working memory capacity is set, which is where it is absolutely key in primary schools and in secondary schools that we get the experiences within the classroom right, that we are able to identify these children that have working memory issues so that we can do everything possible that we can to enable those skills to strengthen and build and reach capacity. Even if that capacity remains small, we need to be able to hand them tricks and tools that they can utilise. In research, it is found that 80% of children with poor working memory consistently fail to reach their age-related expectations. Partly, that's the way that our classrooms and our system is set up. If you provide tools for children with issues with working memories, those tools will be equally beneficial to every other child in the room. In the same way that if you were to set up a classroom to meet the needs of dyslexic children, it's of no detriment to those children who are not dyslexic. So working memory is absolutely key. And there are some characteristics that you can identify. Now, these characteristics could also be indicators of many other things, but they are worth looking for. The child who is quite reserved in a group, who is a listener, seems passive, is uncomfortable contributing. That's because they're putting all their effort into sustaining the memory and taking things in. They find it difficult to be able to express as well as take in and retain information. Those children that find it difficult following instructions. Since finding out more about working memory, it's amazing how many instructions we can give a child just to take from the carpet back to their work area. If you add in, don't forget your pencil, your rubber, your pen, get out your reading book and remember to have a sip of water every 5 minutes, gone. Far too many instructions in one foul swoop. You've lost that child. They've then lost all of that, and then they'll turn around to you and say, what do I need? Now, in the past, that might be seen as the child hasn't bothered listening. Oh, for goodness sake, do I have to say this again to you? Actually, yes, please, yes, you do, because actually you've complicated things. They also have difficulties when a lesson incorporates activities which require processing of thought, but also the storage of a process. The ability to process and store at the same time tends to be so challenging, the experience becomes overwhelming and the child will disengage. So particularly if you have children identified with working memory, you need to be very, very clear on what the outcome is. Is it securing storage of a procedure that can be repeated and repeated and then moved into a different area of the memory? Or is it actually the process and the experience? What do you actually want the child to remember and to learn? For example, if I give you a list of numbers, I want you to think about what the missing numbers are, and then I'm going to choose one of you to tell me what they are. 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. Who can tell me what those missing numbers are?
369.
369. Who was absolutely befuddled at that point? If you have issues with working memory and that second by second retrieval, that seems like an impossible task that nobody's ever going to get. If I added in, continued that number sequence, and there were 11 gaps, I'm not sure anybody in this room would be able to be successful in repeating the numbers that are missing. Unless, of course, you came with a notepad, as some of my colleagues have done, well done, and are jotting things down on a piece of paper, which strengthens the ability. It's a different part of your memory that you're using. They also have place-keeping difficulties. So the idea of that vertical to horizontal, you know, the lessons or copy the Walt off the board, all those things, the writing of the date. Those children that actually even have trouble writing the date off the board, that might be because of a working memory issue. It's always worth digging a little deeper and exploring a little harder. They tend to have a very short attention span. Distractibility is high. So if a leaf falls from a tree, they will turn their head, notice it, and lose again what went in. The other thing to be cautious of and to consider the child holistically is many of these features also overlap into ADHD and other areas of special educational needs. And that's where, if you have concerns about a child's working memory, it is worth digging deeper. I do have some extra materials and information that people could access after this event that dips into that a little bit more. But the difference is, wouldn't be ADHD, because children with working memory issues tend not to be hyperactive or impulsive. If it's purely a working memory issue, you won't see that hyperactivity and impulsivity. They struggle throughout school as too many of the school tasks that we set use excessive working memory, and thereby these children cannot develop a growth mindset because they fail repeatedly. They cannot learn from those errors because they do not have the working memory capacity to retain. So you have to really think long and hard about the number of elements you want that child to remember. So what sort of things can we do within the classroom that are simple and easy, that isn't going to rock your world, but actually may well make a huge difference to a child? Well, one thing is your rough paper. Teaching children to jot things down when somebody is teaching from the earliest age is key. Even if year one, they can scribble, they can make notations, something that might remind them. It's really good when you become more astute at doing this, that those children then can go back and look at their notes. It prompts, it leads, it supports. What do we do when we sit in a lecture? There's a tendency that we take notes. What do we then do with those notes? Well then, at that point, we can probably turn that into a 10,000 word dissertation. It's the same process with children with working memory issue, but the capacity is much, much smaller. But it's about teaching these skills. So rough paper to record thoughts, big paper and pens. How many of you use big paper and pens in the classroom? Children love it, adults love it, use it. The thing is, it frees up the working memory. Every time you've jotted something down on a pad or on a piece of big paper, you no longer have to retain it in your working memory. Thereby there's room for the next bit to go in. Okay? A checklist. For example, year 6 writing, the criteria required for a year 6 child to get expected and age-related expectations in writing, my God, they cannot do it without support. So a checklist of things to include. A tick list. Have you done the date? It can be very simple. Have you included a hyphen? Anything that a child doesn't have to think about because there is a ready prompt next to them. Involve them in developing those prompts, and actually that information becomes even more secure. Some children don't like writing notes because they think you're going to look at them or something's going to happen to them after the event. So the introduction of whiteboards and pens. When a child makes a mistake or isn't happy with what they've written, they then have the opportunity to actually just wipe it off. There's no evidence then of the failure. So again, it assists the child to actually have a go, record it down, change their minds perhaps at a later date. The idea of subtasks, chunking down what a child does into small, manageable bites. The use of a task board. We talk about it so often, but how many teachers and staff in mainstream education actually use the task boards effectively and at different levels? It feels often that the task board is very useful lower down in the school, for example in early years in year 1 and year 2, but that good practice can drop off. Those children with working memory issues, their problem is never going to be solved. You cannot actually extend working memory past that 14 point. So the tools that work are the tools that a child can go back to, that an adult can go back to. So if a task board works really effectively, don't then remove that prop. David Hiley's flow maps is another way of sequencing and structuring things. And as I work in a thinking school, we use his maps prolifically across the curriculum. And again, it's a structure. It provides a scaffold for a child to utilise so they know from one step to another to another to another. It also, verbal rehearsal, which I wish I had done before I walked into this room. Verbal rehearsal, again, it's really key. That idea of allowing a child to use a voice recorder and listen to it back, pause it, listen to it back, pause it. Because if you give the child a voice recorder, it records the whole thing. You play it back as a whole thing, it's still not any help. Teach that child to pause it at intermittent points so that each piece of information can be scribed or recorded elsewhere. And again, it's that idea of it's freeing the working memory in order for the working memory to be used effectively in refining, editing, ordering and structuring, because the focus then is on one step in the process. And what works for children with working memory difficulties actually will work with everyone. But it is a case of thinking beyond what you're used to. If you are bombarded with instructions, your brain will go into a panic, and actually your working memory becomes even less effective than it was before. So think about the children that are within your care. Think about the props that can be used. Think about some of the materials that are out there that can be utilised and built upon. And the Memory Magic programme isn't something that goes over and over and over again. A child can experience a lot of different ways of securing memory and trialling and trusting themselves. The use of mnemonics. Many people will know big elephants cause accidents under little elephants, small elephants even. So practice, verbal rehearsal. But it's those things that we use as memory skills that are even more important for children with issues with their working memory. I before E except after C, even though I know now that's defunct. But all the things that helped you remember will help a child to remember. The other thing with working memory is sometimes you can actually put things to tune. And actually the incorporation of a tune, which is held in a different part of the memory, that association can assist within the learning process. So I guess it's over to you with any questions. I would like a disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I find it all very interesting, the whole idea of neuroscience and development of children's memory and brains, and it's a passion that I have. But I'm sure that I could learn as much from you as you have from me. So thank you very much.